Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another Quran study. God willing, today we'll be reading from Surah number 2, verse 52. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. These are God's revelations. We recite them through you truthfully, for you are one of the messengers. And the footnote here says, in keeping with the mathematical composition of the Quran, God has willed that the name of the messenger mentioned here shall be spelled out mathematically. The discovery of the Quran's miraculous 19-base code has been divinely reserved for God's messenger of the covenant. By adding this first number, 252, plus the geometrical value of Rashad, 505, plus the geometrical value of Khalifa, 725, we get 1482 or 19 times 78. Please see appendices 2 and 26 for the complete details related to the proven identity of God's messenger of the covenant, to whom this verse clearly refers. So this footnote, as it says, referring to this verse, it says that the messenger mentioned here in this verse is Dr. Rashad Khalifa, based on the mathematical proof that is presented here, which is the geometrical value of Rashad Khalifa added to 252. As it says, by adding this first number plus the geometrical value of Rashad Khalifa, we get this number. And, this may be something that causes people to disbelieve instead of believe, but this is the way that the trap is set for people. They look at these proofs and instead of being guided, they're misguided. And, there was just one person, for example, he became a submitter and then he became a Sunni. Following his parents blindly, and when we asked him, why, basically he got stuck in this part where he couldn't understand why in some places we're adding the surah number and the verse number, and some places we're just adding the verse number, and stuff. And so we explained to him that all of these things only add up to the complexity of the miracle. If you were to be given a mathematical challenge, if you were to follow one consistent pattern in one place, that may be an easier challenge for you than if I added multiple aspects into it, like the geometrical value, verse number, or just the verse number and the surah number, etc. So it gets more complex, because it's not just based on this one parameter, but it's based on a bunch of parameters. It could be any different number of combinations. It makes the problem harder, and this causes this person to go astray and ending up being a disbeliever altogether. But this is the power of the Quran, and this is the power of the Quran's mathematical miracle. It is there to distinguish the truthful from the hypocrites. God will now continue reading. Many messengers, one message. Says these, verse 253, these messengers, we bless some of them more than others. For example, God spoke to one, and we raised some of them to higher ranks. And we gave Jesus, son of Mary, profound miracles and supported him with the Holy Spirit. Had God willed, their followers would not have fought with each other after the clear proofs had come to them. Instead, they disputed among themselves. Some of them believed, and some disbelieved. Had God willed, they would not have fought. Everything is in accordance with God's will. So all these messengers, brought one and the same message, which is to worship God alone. God mentions Jesus here, son of Mary, and how his followers fought with each other and disputed among themselves, right? And we all know all those disputes and how they're split in different sects, and none of them is on the right path, and some of them believed and how some of them ended up becoming disbelievers and and ended up inventing a whole new religion, which had nothing to do with God's religion. And God says it was all in accordance with God's will. This was all predestined, and you know, we are where we are. And God says, not only that, every single thing is in accordance with God's will, as we all know. God controls everything. Everything is in accordance with God's will. And this is a reminder for all of us too, because sometimes things happen where we know things may be unfavorable for a certain situation. Sometimes there's injustice. Um, Sometimes there's things that we may not approve of, and we understand a lot of these things could be from Satan. For example, the Messenger of the Covenant talks about the example of Joseph being thrown in the well. Now that was done by Satan, right? But even things that Satan is doing is in accordance with God's will, and so we submit to that. So I mean, really, what matters is how we understand and perceive those events that happen. As long as we understand that God is the one who's doing everything, and we don't respond to them in a way where we're objecting to what God is doing, we have to be very objective in the way we think about these things and go about reacting to things that happen around us. It's very important, right? We're tested through this every single day as we go through events in our life. We're living in this world, which is Satan's domain, and world around us is in complete chaos. So you see these things happening around you, and if you don't keep yourself in check, knowing that God is running everything, everything is in full control, that God is controlling everything, you're going to be living in a constant state of fear and chaos with those people that are in Satan's world, right? Because there's no difference at that time between us and those people, because they don't understand that everything is in accordance with God's will. When you understand that everything is in accordance with God's will, and you submit cheerfully, you belong in God's kingdom. And then when you belong in God's kingdom, then you're in total peace. You're in a state of happiness. You're in a state of calmness, a state of serenity and happiness, right? Automatically, because you're in God's protection, and you realize that God is controlling everything. So no matter what happens around us, it should not affect us at all when we have that mindset, right? The it is the actions that are important, but the mindset alone itself, plays such a big difference, makes such a big difference, and it guides all our actions, going forward, and naturally, guides our destiny, our final destination. It's all starts from how we perceive and how we look at these things, right? Our perspective has to be aligned with Quran, and knowing that God is controlling each and everything. Verse 254 says, "No intercession. O you who believe, you shall give to charity from the provisions we have given to you before a day comes where there is no trade, no nepotism, and no intercession. The disbelievers are the unjust. God, there is no other God besides him, the living, the eternal. Never a moment of unawareness or slumber overtakes him. To him belongs everything in the heavens and everything on earth. Who could intercede with him except in accordance with his will? He knows their past and their future. No one attains any knowledge except as he wills. His dominion encompasses the heavens and the earth, and ruling them never burdens him. He is the Most High, the Great." So first off, we see, as the subtitle says, no intercession, right? And the footnote for this verse I'm going to read, God willing, it says, "One of Satan's clever tricks is attributing the power of intercession to powerless human idols such as Jesus and Muhammad," Appendix 8. And we can see how powerful this trick is, from Satan. Only applies to, obviously, people who are under his control. People who idolize, who have tendency to do idol worship, who are doubtful about their hereafter. Um, but nevertheless, it's a very clever trick through which, the majority of the humans are going to hell, right? Because they don't believe in God without committing idol worship, and most of them believe in some sort of intercessor, that will save them, being people like Jesus, Muhammad, the saints, even people in their families they consider pious people. For example, there's many hadiths about that. For example, if you have a martyr in your family, like he can intercede on behalf of so many people. Like they have come up with different quotas, like um, martyr can, I don't know, like I'm just throwing out numbers out there because I don't remember the exact ones. But they probably they're not even consistent, anyways. But like there's like a martyr can take like 50 people with him, and someone who memorizes the Quran in Arabic can take like 5 people with him, etc. So they have all these different types of hadiths that they believe that these people can intercede on their behalf with God. In the same way they believe Muhammad will intercede, people believe Jesus will intercede, and all these are tricks by Satan, to if to basically get people who are not gonna go to hell, but just because they have decided to have an intercessor, now they are guaranteed hell. Previously, obviously, they weren't guaranteed, but this is how Satan twists and lies to them. He says, "You're not guaranteed heaven, so take Jesus as your savior and your intercessor, so that you will be guaranteed heaven." But obviously, he's lying, because what he's really saying is that you're not guaranteed hell. But if you take him, Muhammad or Jesus as a savior, you're definitely guaranteed hell, right? Because you're committing idol worship. So do that, make my job easier, so that you can go to hell. And that's what people do, as stupid as they are, and ignorant, egotistical people. They end up making the wrong choice, contrary to what God says, contrary to what the Quran says, rejecting the truth, going based on these man-made, lies that they've attributed to God, and end up going to hell. But God tells us very clearly in these verses that on that day there is no trade, no nepotism, right? So when there's no nepotism, how can Muhammad like have nepotism with people who claim to be his followers, or Jesus have nepotism for people who have taken him as their savior and whatnot, right? And the verse following that is telling us there's no intercession on that day, no intercession, period, right? So if you were already, there's nobody whose fate is going to be changed by someone interceding for them. You can you can say all you want for someone to go to heaven and plead to God, right? But if the person doesn't deserve, based on their actions, nothing's going to change for them, right? And that's the beauty of God's justice, right? In this world you can have nepotism, and you can get the best positions and the best ranks in the world, but that's only in this world. In the hereafter, there's no trade, there's no nepotism. I mean, that is decided by how we live this in this life. That decides our eternal ranks. You don't need someone who is a high ranking person who is favorable to God to go and intercede for you, because that's not how the system works. We're all responsible for our actions, and we're all being tested to get our eternal ranks. So if you want to get somewhere in the hereafter, if you don't want to be doomed, for your own salvation, you have to remember that God is our only Lord and Master, and He's the only one who can harm us or benefit us, and He's the only one who's the ultimate judge. He's the sovereign, and He's the only one who decides our fate. And there's no intercessors with God. If you think that anyone can intercede on your behalf, you know, that knows better than God where you really need to be, then you're committing idol worship, and you're guaranteeing hell for yourself, right? So we have to stay away from that as much as possible. We have to stay away from a tiny hint of idol worship. Absolutely. And God is I mean, this is God, right? I mean, it says, God, there's no God besides God, the living, the eternal. He never dies. He never has a moment of slumber, even let alone sleeping or passing away. As most of these idols that they worship have, right? Because they're humans, uh, and fallible humans. And God says, to him belongs everything in the heavens, everything on earth. Who could intercede with him except in accordance with God's will? So any intercession that works will only work if the person genuinely deserved to be in heaven in the first place, right? And if that's the case, what's the point of you interceding even? I mean, you can pray for people's forgiveness. That is a form of worship, but asking God to intercede on behalf of anybody, is not gonna work unless the person actually deserves to be in heaven, right? You're not, and we can't ask forgiveness for idol worshippers. So if the person is an idol worshiper, you can't ask God to get him into heaven. That is a sin. But if the person's a believer, you can pray for that person to go to heaven. Oh God, please forgive this person and admit him into paradise. That's totally fine because that person is not an idol worshiper, and that counts as your prayer, right? So in that sense, we can see that intercession will only work for people who deserve to be in heaven, and interceding on behalf of idol worshippers is a sin, right? So that's not only does that not even only work not work, but it's also a sin. And so we have to remember that. And these are all the idol worshippers we're talking about who believe in intercession. So Muhammad is not ever going to intercede on behalf of an idol worshiper. We know he may intercede for the believers that he knows, like his mother or whatever. I'm not saying his mother was a believer, but any person, I'm saying for that matter, who's a believer, on the day of judgment, people will intercede on behalf of other believers, but the intercession will only be effective if the person genuinely deserves to be in heaven, and God knows if the person deserves to be in heaven or not. So you don't even have to do that, right? That's why it's important to understand that there's no such thing as intercession. It only works for people who are already going to heaven. Um, so God will continue reading verse 256. No compulsion in religion. There shall be no compulsion in religion. The right way is now distinct from the wrong way. Anyone who denounces the devil and believes in God has grasped the strongest bond, one that never breaks. God is here omniscient. God is Lord of those who believe. He leads them out of darkness into the light. As for those who disbelieve, their lords are their idols. They lead them out of the light into darkness. These will be the dwellers of hell. They abide in it forever. So, as the subtitle says, um, you know, believing in God has to come from the person from their own free will. You cannot um, force people to become believers, and you cannot force people to convert to submission, right? It has to come from the person. Now, you can introduce people to the message, right? But that's all you can do. You really don't have to like convince the person going out of your way. Like, if the person is not willing to accept, just leave. Don't push people and try to force them to become submitters, right? I mean, we actually see that happening in various groups where people try to convert other people, to Islam. For example, they start this, flashy sort of debate and stuff, and their goal is, I'm gonna convert this person, and I mean, I'm not gonna play that whole thing, right? But like, we understand that and you can recognize it when you see it, right? But that's totally going the wrong way. I mean, of course, you can debate with people in the best possible manner with the intention of helping the person, um, but it's not meant to be like a cage fight where you invite people and you're showing how knowledgeable you are so other people can praise you, etc., right? And definitely there is no element of pushing people, forcing people. If God says, we cannot guide the ones we love, obviously sometimes we may come off as pushy and and forceful, and sometimes we may even be getting somewhat pushy and forceful because we really want someone to be guided, especially if it's someone that is close to us or dear to us, and we really want this person to accept the message, right? But we have to understand that how God's system works, right? It's God's system that a person who's only seeking the truth, that's the kind of person who will actually be able to see the truth. If you're not opening yourself to acknowledge and see the truth, if your mind's already made up from the beginning and you are only looking at the scripture or the proofs just so you can say you're right and this is wrong, you're not even going to be able to do that, right? So, but the thing is, someone who is genuinely looking to worship God and who's genuinely someone who wants to hear the message, like if you just give him a hint of the message, he will come running to it, towards it. Like you don't have to run after people to, hey, like come look at the truth, look at the miracle, look at the messenger, look at the end of the world. I mean, look at these things. A person who is really looking for the truth, I mean, you just introduce them to it and they will get hooked, right? You don't have to try to keep dragging these people into submission. I mean, you can invite them, talk to them, debate with them, but there comes a point where, it becomes obvious that, this person's not willing to accept the message or not ready for it, um, whatever, and you just leave them alone. This If someone does not appreciate this message, God does not give it to them, right? I mean, you go out of your way to invite people. You don't have anything to gain from it. Like it's not like a pyramid scheme we're inviting people to, like where it's gonna benefit us, right? It's only gonna benefit these people, and if they look at this message and say, like what is in it? What is in this for this person? Like why is he, so keen to bring me to the message? And they act in a way like it shows for most people that you invite to submission. A lot of them, you know, they um, they they look at it with skepticism and they think that there's something for you, like why why are you doing this, and we should ask ourselves too, like I know we want to have the satisfaction of bringing people into submission. It's a good deed, right? But your work ends when you have introduced a person to the message, and whether this person accepts or not, it really doesn't matter. You did your part. Your credit is there, and just leave it at that, right? And then we can see on the flip side and how people who are not following the Quran, how they enforce religion on people. Like they force people in many countries to forcefully, by law, force them to close their shops, close all businesses. They're not allowed to serve customers even if they want to. They're not allowed by law to leave their shops open when it's time for, let's say, Friday prayer. In some countries, it's just for Friday prayer. In other countries, in other places, it's like for other prayers as well, like on a daily basis. They're at like in like Afghanistan. If you go with the Taliban, like they will do it for like a lot of other prayers too. I'm sure. I've seen it happen, like at least on a smaller scale. Like they will do it. And like in the Middle East and stuff, like they would actually beat people up if it's time for prayer and people are joining the prayer and everybody's not gathered in the mosque. People that are outside or people that are not ready to pray. Especially, and it especially applies to the students that they have at the mosque. They would beat them up if they're not doing their prayers. And that is obviously compulsion. And God says there's no compulsion in religion. The right way is distinct from the wrong way. Whoever wants to believe, let them believe. Whoever wants to disbelieve, let them disbelieve. And it goes also to show us that even when you have like a political system or something, like don't enforce your religious laws you know on people, because people should not be following religious guidance or laws uh, based on the fear of government or fear of punishment. People should be following the law based on the fear of God, not the fear of going to prison or paying a fine, you know. And that's why the Quran, it advocates extreme libertarianism, so anybody who wants to commit sins, they're free to commit sin as long as they're not hurting other people, like they're not hurting people or stealing from them, etc. They should be allowed to do whatever they want, and that's the kind of society that God wants us to have. And so that, people are, easy to just do whatever they want, and God will judge them. And then God tells us that God is the Lord of those who believe. If God is your Lord and Master, He's going to guide you towards the light from the darkness, from idol worship. He's going to guide you to monotheism. He's going to guide you to purify yourself and grow your soul. And He's going to help you through everything in life. On the other hand, if your God is not God, these idol worshippers, they have these idols in their life, and God says they invite them to hell. They lead them to hell. They lead them to darkness from the light. Like they could be like borderline righteous people, and then they commit idol worship, and now they're destined for hell, right? And then they also fall off the path completely, right? Like someone could be like quote unquote a good person and then commit idol worship, and now he's hellbound, right? I mean, so, and all his works are nullified, so he's just going towards Satan. um so God will not continue reading verse 258, Abraham's courageous debate. Have you noted the one who argued with Abraham about his Lord? Though God had given him kingship, Abraham said, My Lord grants life and death. He said, I grant life and death. Abraham said, God brings the sun from the east. Can you bring it from the west? The disbeliever was stumped. God does not guide the wicked. So, so this verse talks about Abraham's courageous debate. And, this was a king that was there at the time of um, uh, Abraham, and God had given him kingship, right? God is the one who had given him kingship. So he said, I grant life and death. He thinks he's running the show. He thinks he is running the country, and in in the case we have now, some king will think that they're running not only this country but the whole world, right? But we know that God is the one who gives and takes, and He's the one who runs everything, right? Not him. And he thought that he was ordering people to be executed, or that he was allowing people to live, by exonerating them or issuing them pardons, that they're the ones who are granting life to people, right? But this is how Abraham debated with him. He says, "Okay, my God brings the sun from the east. Can you bring it from the west?" And obviously, then he had no answer, right? And this is how, I mean, and this obviously, as it says in the subtitle, this takes courage to stand up against the king of his time, to show that he was not God, right? But it doesn't, obviously that courageous debate didn't change the fate of this person. He probably continued to disbelieve. Um, but this is an example for us that how we should be in our lives. So God will not continue reading verse 259, lessons about death. Consider the one who passed by a ghost town and wondered, how can God revive this after it had died? God then put him to death for 100 years, then resurrected him. He said, how long have you stayed here? He said, I have been here a day or part of the day. He said, no, you have been here 100 years. Yet look at your food and drink. They did not spoil. Look at your donkey. We thus render you a lesson for the people. Now note how we construct the bones, then cover them with flesh. When he realized what had happened, he said, now I know that God is omnipotent. SubhanAllah. So this example that God talks about, this actually, there's a footnote there. It says, the lesson we learn here is that the period of death Only the unrighteous die. The righteous go straight to heaven, passes like one day. See 18, 19 through 25 in Appendix 17. Right? So this may confuse some people. I know it did confuse me for some time. Um, it says that the righteous go straight to heaven, passes like one day. Like, so um, this doesn't mean that this person had to wait, um, till the end of the world. He when you die, you go straight to paradise. Um, but we're being shown here that when you die, that time is uh, is I mean, it's. I mean, if you are going to compare it to this world, I mean, it looks like a long time, but in the other dimension, it doesn't mean anything, and it's hard for us to grasp because we're in this world, But in the hereafter, we'll understand that what time and space was, the experience that we have in time and space. I mean, that doesn't even apply, and the period of death itself also passes like one day. So even though the righteous, I mean, they will go and they'll be in paradise, but the day of judgment, when it's the day of judgment, I mean, that period also, uh, is like um, passing like one day for these people. And you can look at Appendix 17 for more details, God willing. We can go to Appendix 17 later and look at that also when we go through our comments and further discussion, God willing. And it also says C 18, 19 through 25 in Appendix 17, right? So this doesn't mean that people who die, they are in a state of coma up until the day of resurrection, right? I know a certain group of people who, came up with this lie, even though the Messenger of the Covenant has been very clear about what happens when someone dies and how these people are currently in paradise, and they go straight to heaven, in the sense that they're living in heaven now in an active and utopian life. They believe that these all these people are asleep, but just the fact that it's just gonna happen like one night that somehow these people are still not in heaven, right? So that's not the case. But this comes from these people, taking this footnote, and interpreting it in a way that uh, contradicts with many of the verses what we find in the Quran, and many explanations by the Messenger of the Covenant. Um, so then, talking about this lesson itself, right? I mean, we can see uh, from this example and the example of the seven sleepers that and our own example, right? I mean, when we go to sleep, we don't know how long we have been asleep, right? It's just that 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 doesn't apply to us. I mean, we only remember like if we wake up in between, or we have moments in between where we are going in and out of sleep. We can probably rely on that. But if you go in a deep sleep and you don't wake up, and you can go to sleep for 1 hour, or you can go to sleep for 3 hours, you're not gonna know how long you have slept unless you actually look at your watch, right? I mean, this you can tell pretty much, right? And so this would apply to someone if that was to happen for even 100 years, right? But the part here that this person saw was significant, was that the the food that this person had, the food did not spoil at all. So even though 100 years passed, the food did not decompose at all, but the donkey did, and that's why God says, no, now let me show you how to reconstruct, the bones and everything, and he showed how he will resurrect. Just and with this example of the donkey was completely decomposed, and he brought the donkey back. He resurrected it in front of this person, and so that shows to us that God is omnipotent, and it also shows to us about death that people who die, it passes like one day. So also people who, for example, will go to hell, for them it applies in the sense that they will be asleep and they will have a constant nightmare, and it passes like a day, and then they will actually be thrown into hell. So it's not like they have they have this time of reprieve where they're not being punished. It's just passes like one day. They have this long nightmare, that seems never ending. But then the nightmare after, right after that, they wake up. They'll wake up like a day, after, and witness hell, right? So as far as we're concerned, I mean, our perception, we have to look at it the same way, right? I mean, when we think about heaven and hell, how do you perceive it, right? I mean, if you end up dying today or tomorrow, right? I mean, when would your heaven or hell, when would you actually see it? It's like you will see it the next day, right? Pretty literally, like you'll see it right away, you know? So, so just people, they look at it in this way, with this mindset where they don't realize how immediate the consequences are. I mean, obviously, we know that, uh, for someone who starts living a life of disobeying God and disregarding God and forgetting God, I mean, hell will start there, right? But I'm talking about when your life is terminated, how soon do you actually see actual hell and heaven? I mean, it's, as far as we're concerned, it's pretty immediate, like right away, right? Because if you're a righteous person, you're gonna be invited in heaven right away. Your soul is gonna walk out from your body, gently. And if you're a bad person, you're just gonna have a nightmare like one day, and the next day you're gonna see yourself in hell. So it's like that, right? And we have to see it like that, and this will also help us. It should, because that's the way it is for all the people, and so this should motivate us to take this life seriously. When people see something distant, it's like, kind of like, when you go to school and you have exams, right? And if your exams are like 3 months ahead, you're not so worried. But when it comes near, like tomorrow, or or the day after, like, the closer it gets, the more you feel the anxiety and nervousness and fear. So we should have that, because we should know that it it's going to be immediately after this life is terminated. We don't know when it's going to be. If it's going to be tomorrow or day after or a year later or 10 years from now, right? But whenever it ends, our life, the next life, the real life is going to start. And so we have to be prepared for that. Imagine the people who have no clue and they don't care, and what happens to them. They just have this, blackout all of a sudden. Someone's driving immediately, they end up dying, and then boom, the next day or right after, their misery and inferno will start, right? As far as they're concerned. So I mean, it's pretty scary if we think about it, right? So we have to be prepared for that, and we have to ask ourselves if we are prepared now, because because you're never going to be prepared if you're going to say that you're going to prepare for it later, right? That later will never happen. And whatever you're going to have to do, you're going to have to do now to prepare yourself, so that, whenever that happens, that day happens, you're ready when you go to God. 260, every believer needs reassurance. My time here is ending. My time here with the study, I mean, is ending. So it says, every believer needs assurance. Abraham said, "My Lord, show me how you revive the dead." He says, "Do you not believe?" He said, "Yes, but I wish to reassure my heart." He said, "Take 4 birds, study their marks, place a piece of each bird on top of a hill, then call them to you. They will come to you in a hurry. You should know that God is Almighty, most wise." the best investment. The example of those who spend their monies in the cause of God is that of a grain that produces 7 spikes with 100 grains in each spike. God multiplies this manifold for whomever He wills. God is bounteous, nor. Those who spend their money in the cause of God then do not follow their charity with insult or harm will receive their recompense from their Lord. They have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. Kind words and compassion are better than a charity that is followed by insult. God is rich, clement. O you who believe, do not nullify your charities by inflicting reproach and insult, like one who spends his money to show off while disbelieving in God in the last day. His example is like a rock covered with a thin layer of soil. As soon as heavy rain falls, it washes off the soil, leaving it a useless rock. They gain nothing from their efforts. God does not guide disbelieving people. So I'm gonna just have a brief pause here. So we see from the example that God showed to Abraham, how Abraham, even though he was never an idol worshiper, he needed some kind of reassurance, and God did give him the reassurance by having him put the 4 birds and studying their marks and placing pieces of each bird on top of a hill, and then how when he called them, uh, these birds, became whole again, and God resurrected him, showed him that this is how God will revive the land. Like, you could be split in 4 or 5 pieces, or 100 pieces for that matter, on different parts of the hill, let's say. But when it's time for you to come back to God, I mean, God's gonna bring you back to whole. It's easy for Him to do that, right? And then we're being told about the best investment, spending our monies in the cause of God, right? Striving in the cause of God, and how profitable of an investment it is, which is unlike any other investment in this world or even for our hereafter. I mean, this is the best investment period for us to invest money in the cause of God. And this is why it's important for us that when we do seek God's provisions, it's important first that we seek God's provisions, right? And we seek them. Why? Because we seek them with the intention of striving in the cause of God, because striving in the cause of God will bring to us the ranks that we need to get us to our final destination, close to God, right? And it shows to us it's a very profitable investment. Like, really, if you want to go to God, I mean, number one priority should be to strive in the cause of God as much as possible, and you should try to strive, to go to school, to study, to make a career, while you're in that state, so that you can, with the intention that, you can do stuff, earn money, whether it's through business or through working for someone else, whatever way it is, your intention has to be that you're gonna strive in the cause of God. With the money you're gonna get, you're gonna be charitable, you're gonna strive in the cause of God, you're gonna spend in the cause of God, and that turns all of your efforts, you're studying, you're going to school, I mean, you're going to work, all of these things will be counted towards your worship of God, because you're thinking about God and you're doing it with the intention of pleasing God, to strive for the hereafter, and God will bless you accordingly, with your intentions that you have, which is to spend in the cause of God, right? And it's the best investment, as we know. God says He multiplies it many times over, right? So that percentage, if you think about it in the worldly terms, there's nothing that gives you investment, a return on investment on this scale, right? So this is by far the best investment that we know. And not only that, I mean, it's an eternal investment. You're going to get the ranks for eternity, that will never change. You will never be evicted from the mansions upon mansions that God talks about, and you're going to be the closest to God, right? And so that is our ultimate goal, is to be redeemed with God, to be closest to God, and this is the way to get there, to strive in the cause of God, So it's very important that we look at, the example in this life. I mean, we're not like the traditional so-called Mohammedans, say, who tell people that, no, life is nothing, and so just leave everything, go to the mosque, and cut your ties with the rest of the world. or become a monk, or someone, who just completely disowns the world and just sit in a corner and pray. No, we are submitters to God, and we tell people that you can strive in the cause of God, go make money, uh, and spend in the cause of God, give to charity, help people, and further the cause of submission. Bring the message to the people. Print Qurans. Build mosques. Dedicated to God alone, and strive. And this is going to help you first and foremost, and then the rest of the people will be guided to submission too. But you are the objective here. Growing your soul is the primary objective of doing all of that, right? And so whatever you have to do to grow your soul, I mean, this becomes part of that, um, God willing. And then we're told about how to give to charity. When we give to charity, we should do it with extreme care. Just the fact that you're helping somebody is not enough. I mean, the way you're doing it is also important, right? You have to do it with kindness and compassion. And even if you have to refuse to help somebody, that is important, especially if you are going to a place or end up being somewhere where you're surrounded by people who are in need, right? Whether they're beggars or other people, it's very important to maintain, um, kindness and compassion. People can get bothered and annoyed when, people are persistently begging around them, or something like that sometimes, right? And you can find yourself in a position like that if you go to a place where there's a lot of beggars. Um, or you could, find yourself in a situation where someone close to you is in need, and believe me, Satan will find ways. Sorry, I understand I'm going above my time, so I'll try to speed it up. But Satan will try to get you to disobey God by somehow, talking you into being harsh or mean-hearted to the person who needs the charity, because he wants to nullify your charity by making you do something that will end up wasting your efforts, right? And it shows the example that is here is, a layer of thin soil, that falls over a rock. I mean, obviously, a wind can just make it disappear, a slight gust of wind. So it's just goes to waste, right? And so it's better to be kind and compassionate than to give to charity, a bunch of money, and then insult the person, right? So this shows to us to be respectful to people, not based on their financial standards, but just based on the fact that there are people, and God tells us to be kind and compassionate. So, and when there are people who are in need, that doesn't make them any lower than you. That's just the position they're in, and God is testing you by these things and how you respond in those situations, right? You're not any better than them just because you have money and let's say they don't. Like, people feel a sense of superiority over people who don't have money, and especially they feel a greater sense of superiority if they end up helping these people. And sometimes they can be mean hearted, whether they realize it or not. But God is telling us not to be that way. And believe me, I mean, there's so many people like that in this world, and we have to remember to set a better example than those people. Um, God willing, may God guide us to do that. So I'll just continue quickly reading these last two verses, and then I'll we can have questions and comments. So charity, it says the example of those who give their money seeking God's pleasure out of sincere conviction is that of a garden on high fertile soil. When heavy rain falls, it gives twice as much crop. If heavy rain is not available, a drizzle will suffice. God is seer of everything you do. Does any one of you wish to own a garden of palm trees and grapes with flowing streams and generous crops? Then, just as he grows old and while his children are still dependent on him, a holocaust strikes and burns up his garden. God thus um, clarifies the revelations for you that you may reflect. So, I mean, the verses are explanatory, and we're being reminded that people who give their money seeking God's pleasure, it's uh, it's like garden on high fertile soil. Even if you have small drizzle, the way it works. When you have a high fertile soil, um, that even a little bit of drizzle will go a long way, in the way that it's absorbed and the nutrients, how it allows the plants to grow. But if the soil is bad, there are no nutrients in the soil. You doesn't matter how much water you put on it, it's not going to make any difference, right? And so that's the idea behind someone who's sincere versus someone who's insincere. A person who's insincere can give all his wealth, but the fact that he's not sincere is not going to help him at all. But a person who's sincere, who gives it with sincerity and with following God's law, with reverence in his heart, who's going to be kind and compassionate, is that his example is that of a high fertile soil that will produce its fruit and its and even gives twice as much, you know. So it's important to have the sincerity and the reverence in our hearts. Just giving to charity alone doesn't mean anything. It has to come from a place of reverence for God, with the right intentions. And the same example is that of someone who, we see here as a righteous person, and um, you know um, uh, it's talking about a person who owns a garden of palm trees and grapes, and then he grows old while his children are still dependent on him. Everything is destroyed by some Holocaust. It says it strikes and burns up his garden, right? And God says He thus clarifies His revelations for people who may reflect. So that would be an example of someone who just gives his money to, let's say, to charity, but his heart is not in the right place. It's all wasted, right? And it's just a massive Holocaust is, destruction on a massive scale. Um, like something that is catastrophic, right? A total devastation and demolition or annihilation, right? So, I mean, that should tell you how important it is for us to have our hearts in the right place. So, with this, God willing, I'll end. If you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free. Thank you, and sorry it went over time.
MashaAllah. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
MashaAllah. Thank you. Good study. Yeah, the point you were just talking about, seeing, you see this a lot, like with these people, you find them on YouTube or these influencers, and they do it just for show.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're given a lot of money, which I've seen like comments from both sides, like saying, "Oh, well, it's still good. You're helping this person,"
Mm-hmm.
which I mean, God's really helping that person, but the person doing it is just doing it for clout. I think that's the new generational word I'm learning. That's what the Generation Z or something use. But yeah, they're just doing it for show, and um, that's example of what not to do. It makes sense, why uh, the charity given in private, you know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that God says it remits more of our sins, because we know only, all that matters is what God, gaining God's approval, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're doing it. We're not doing it for people or to show people
Mm-hmm.
that. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're doing it for praise and for claps, for likes.
yeah, exactly. In some ways, it's even a business for these people. Like they do it,
Mm-hmm.
calculate that it. Like a lot of these giveaways and stuff too are just business. I mean, maybe that's a little bit different than charity, a giveaway, but
Mm-hmm.
there's some that do it, yeah, just for likes and stuff, or just for
Mm-hmm.
satisfaction. of their feelings and all that.
Yeah, I mean, like, what is the objective, for these people to do that, right? I mean, if you want to help somebody, just go help somebody. Like, why do you have to make a YouTube video or whatever video you
And they
make?
put a person's face like, man, this person down on their luck, like they might be living on the street or something.
Uh-huh.
And like, man, that person doesn't. But they're not going to object because if you're offering them like $3,000 a haircut,
Yeah,
one
especially those haircut
hotel,
ones,
like,
right?
huh?
Especially the ones with the haircut, like we've seen a lot of those, right? I mean,
Yeah,
find a homeless person,
exactly.
get them a haircut, give them a suit.
They would much prefer that to be private, but I mean, it's kind of like they're having to like, I guess, go along with it because it's either that
Mm-hmm.
or like the
Mm-hmm.
person. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's so they're
Unless
not.
you do it in some anonymous way, like like you don't know who gave the money, who did it. I mean, they make it
Mhm.
pretty much clear like who's doing it.
Right, right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, good reminders about God is running everything, and
Mm-hmm.
that's like the ultimate truth. Despite what we see,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
or even things
some
around us.
king of some place, you know, recently said, I don't know if anybody watches the news, but he said, "I run the country, I run the world," uh, and but we know that God is the one who's running everything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They're just like led on to.
To
They're
believe
really
that
the big.
they're running the world. Imagine that's just Satan talking.
Yeah, exactly. He's laughing at them too, like all these people that are following him and stuff, following
Yeah,
Satan.
I mean, if it was, they don't even know how to say, spell certain words. Like,
Yeah. Wait, who said what king said that?
huh?
Was
The king of this one country, the new
yeah,
king.
yeah, yeah. I think like these people are probably just like they're led on, like the
Mm-hmm.
Quran led on just to increase
Mm-hmm.
to expose their sinfulness and no, or confirm their sinfulness, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and
Mm-hmm.
their punishment that much
Mm-hmm.
uh greater. They're gonna look back and see what a bad person they were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's really a cheap trade, because really, the more I'm looking at this stuff, seeing this stuff, and then just even reflecting on stuff from like, I heard like years ago or decades ago, these people really do act like, yeah, yeah, I seen your comment. They really do act like they're gonna live forever, and the Quran verse is so true because the things that they're planning for, like even I sent you that picture that GBT even recognized it. I mean, the AI,
Mm-hmm.
how they're trying to themselves, they're uploading their consciousness, they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out ways to do these. Like even the Queen of England
Mm-hmm.
tried to do that failed miserably, and
Mm-hmm.
then they tried covering it up. But like yeah, and the stuff that they're planning too, like they're acting like they're gonna live forever, like
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna, but they don't realize. I mean, like I mean, the current, you know, I mean, he's like in his 70s. I mean, he probably has another 10 years maybe to
Mm-hmm.
live. Like these people don't think about. Like I think that's why they're so afraid of like the Quran
Mm-hmm.
says they because of what their hands have been forth.
Mm-hmm.
That's why trying to clone themselves and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or they think their money can help them. Like the more
Mm-hmm.
rich they get,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps, these
Yeah.
are like real life examples.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Money won't help them,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Oh, I hear the cat.
Yeah, they're playing with each other.
Mashallah. I heard it. I thought I heard it a few times when you're doing the study. I wonder what they were up to.
Mhm.
Yeah, and good. Like verse 256, there's no compulsion. Um, good reminder about yeah, we people the message, and then that's uh, and you also clarify something important too, like between with each other and other submitters or people who are maybe close. Like it's good to be a little pushy sometimes, because sometimes that's exactly what we need to I'm just thinking about myself and the help I received. I mean, going back, a few years ago, different things. I mean, that's exactly. But with I mean, that's because like we're family and we look out for each other. We're in this together.
Mhm.
But for people, we have the um, example of
Mhm.
just like the messengers too, like the many verses that says to the messengers when he's delivering the message that your sole mission is to deliver this message, and
Mhm.
he's no more than a warner, a clarifying warner, I think, and a bringer of good news. Both a bringer of good news, and the sole mission is to deliver the message. So
Mhm.
um yeah, good yeah, good comments on that.
Anyone else has any other comments or questions? Any off-topic questions from anyone? Okay, so I guess thank you all for joining us. God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
God bless you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, brother, for the study.